This is a message of hope for people who think they're fat. There's a big difference between fat and inflammation. Fat is obviously the product of eating too many calories, and your body stores those calories as fat. Although, what we've learned is fat is not from eating fat. Fat's from eating sugar and carbs. High fructose corn syrup, for example, converts to fat faster than anything else. And most Americans drink gallons of the stuff. So, ironically, if you want to lose weight, replace sugar and carbs with fat. Fat gives you a longer lasting energy source. So eat proteins and fats, avoid sugars and carbs if you want to really lose weight. But the problem is that your extra pounds are probably not purely from calories. They're probably from inflammation. Inflammation is completely different. Inflammation is where your body is puffed up. It's storing liquids, it's storing fat and refusing to burn it. You've got a metabolism problem. You're not burning fat. Yeah, you can go on the whole keto thing and try to get into ketosis, but more and more people are finding that ketosis alone is not shedding the pounds. And if you do it wrong, it can be unhealthy. So inflammation is caused by your body being sick. You're probably inflamed at the cellular level. What we've learned is that we are inflamed at the cellular level. Our bodies, all the way down in the cell level, are having a hard time processing food to be energy, nutrients. The cell walls are not absorbing what they should be absorbing. They're not expelling what they should be expelling. And that problem at the cellular level is now in all of our tissues. And so we're retaining more water, chemicals, fats than we should. And the normal process of dieting and ketosis doesn't apply real well when you've got an inflammation issue, right? If you hurt your body, like you sprain your ankle, it swells up. Your body does that to protect itself. Obviously, when you sprain your ankle, that's not fat, that's fluids, right? That's lymphatic, that's fluid, that's blood, that's all kinds of things, not fat, right? So your body is probably inflamed. If you've got a belly and too much weight around your belly, for example, it could be extra fat, but I'll bet you that it's also inflammation, particularly when you just can't lose it. If you go down to a diet and you're running on 1,000 to 2,000 calories a day, you should be losing weight rapidly, especially if you're walking and doing moderate exercise. If you've cut your calorie intake and you're doing moderate exercise and you've done that for a year and you're not losing weight and you're still 40 pounds overweight or more, you've got an inflammation problem. And so just simply changing your calorie intake is not the solution. So what we've learned is we're sick and we're inflamed because we're sick. I've been all over Europe over the last 10 to 20 years. Portugal, Spain, England, Germany, France, Italy. And I've also visited with people who are from Eastern Europe and Russia and Africa and Australia and New Zealand and Southeast Asia and Japan. And I've learned something. And that is that people outside the U.S. are healthier, even if they have other health problems, like even, in some countries, parasites are a real problem, malaria, diseases that we don't see so much here in the U.S. But still, on the whole, people are healthier. They look better, they're thinner, and it's gotten worse. The difference between Americans, people who eat an American diet, and the people that I meet who, while I'm either overseas or they're here briefly, the difference is widening. Back in the 70s and 80s, if I traveled or met somebody from outside the U.S., they looked pretty much like us, same weight. But as time went on, I began noticing Americans were getting larger, and I fell prey to the same misunderstanding that everybody else promotes, and that is, oh, it's because Americans eat too much, right? Our food intake is just too great. Our portion size is much larger. We eat, more carbs, more fats, etc. And I now have come to believe that all of that conventional explanation for the difference in American weight and that of people outside is not due to the quantity of the food or even necessarily what we eat, although that's involved. Let me trace my journey back to 2011. I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a particularly lethal kind called double-hit non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which means multiple mutations of cells that are multiplying out of control. That's what cancer is. It's unrestrained multiplication of cancerous cells. And I went to stage 3 real quick. I had tumors in my throat down here, and they were also starting to form elsewhere, and a bone biopsy confirmed that the cancer had spread to my bone marrow. So that's bad. I had 6 rounds of chemo, and then had a wonderful doctor that designed a stem cell program for me, and used my own stem cells to restart my bone marrow after they killed my bone marrow. And that's what saved my life. I got my own stem cells back after they killed my bone marrow, May 1st of 2012, and obviously I lived. But the experience taught me a tremendous amount about my health. And I asked all the specialists. I saw 4 different world-renowned specialists in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And when I asked why, they all had the same shocking answer. Roundup. Roundup is known to be the #1 cause of blood cancer. Of course, that begs the question, why is it legal? Why is it sold in every Home Depot in America? Well, that's a different video. But the good news is we know exactly what causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the same thing for other lymphomas, leukemia. It's all Roundup. This is why blood cancers were almost non-existent decades ago, and now it's just rampant. And I did research in that time frame and found out that Roundup is illegal in many countries. In fact, as of today, I believe it's illegal in 33 countries and heavily discouraged in another several dozen. And only in America do we spray it on everything, whether it needs it or not. Roundup is an herbicide. It kills plants. And so the way that they do mass produce growing for the last 40 or 50 years is they spray Roundup on a huge field of corn or wheat or soy or whatever they're growing, and they produce a genetically modified variant of the plant that will withstand Roundup. And then they spray Roundup on the entire field, and of course the weeds are not genetically modified, so they die. It's kind of like if you're a person and you were made somehow to not be affected by radioactivity, then you nuke the entire world, and only people who are genetically modified would survive. So it's that equivalent in the plant world. So it's horrible, of course. And so whenever you see any food in America, it is probably grown with genetically modified plants that can withstand Roundup. So that means that everything that can withstand Roundup has Roundup in it. And in fact, Roundup is so commonly used all over the United States that in some places the groundwater is just not safe to drink. Like, you shouldn't drink well water in Nebraska, for example, because every body of water, every well, all the underground aquifers, everything has Roundup in it. And that's now pretty much the story in most of the U.S. You can go anywhere in the U.S., test the water, and there's Roundup. Except where it's 100% rainwater fed water, and then of course it's clear. But anything that comes from draining land, like in Texas, people spray Roundup all over their lawns, and all of the yard services spray Roundup to kill weeds every spring, and so the lakes and rivers are full of Roundup. So I live in Texas. And so the entire environment in Texas and every other state is saturated in Roundup, especially anywhere where there's suburbs, because of course we spray it to make pretty lawns. But every time you see a pretty lawn, it's a toxic lawn. And the reason no weeds live there is because nothing can live there. In fact, it kills animals and everything, right? It's a pretty nasty chemical. It lives forever. It doesn't break down quickly. A lot of people say, oh, it breaks down right away. No, it doesn't. It lasts something on the order of 30 years. So the Roundup we put in our environment is going to be here for decades, even if we stop today. So this is the bad news. And there are many other problems as well. There's food colors, there's preservatives, but Roundup is the single biggest health hazard in the United States today. It's in everything. It's permeated everything. Even if you have a garden and you grow your food yourself, there's probably residual Roundup in your garden because you're probably using city water, which comes from lakes, which are full of Roundup. It's making everything sick. And it's creating, so the reason dogs, for example, have a lot of cancer is because, well, what do they drink? They drink water that runs off of lawns. They play in your lawn. They're covered in Roundup, and so they die of cancer, typically, at 10 to 12 years old, instead of living a healthy, normal life to 15 years or more. So what does this have to do with weight and inflammation? So Roundup interrupts all of your body's processes, conversion of B vitamins, all your vitamin conversions to usable forms that your body can use, all your mineral conversions to usable forms your body can use, making the cells hardened so they have a hard time absorbing nutrients. Roundup screws up every bodily process. And so it causes autoimmune disorders. So something like 30% of Americans now have hormonal or autoimmune problems, endocrine problems, where hormones are screwed up. Thyroid is a big issue, thyroiditis, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, low testosterone or high testosterone or progesterone, estrogen, all of these issues. Almost everybody in the U.S. now has some kind of hormonal problem, and it's happening younger and younger now into people that are just in their 20s and 30s. Thyroid problems, the thyroid ages and has a hard time later on in life. So thyroid problems used to appear like in your 70s and 80s. Now thyroid issues are happening to people in their 40s, 30s, now in their 20s. So then all of these toxins. Glyphosate is just one example. It's probably the worst. There are many more. There's heavy metals in everything. There's, like I said, food coloring, preservatives, all of that other stuff. All the stuff you see in a package that is not food is an additive, and that additive is there to extend shelf life or make it prettier, right? So a really red tomato that was picked early, well, it's got some kind of dye on it. A box of anything on a grocery store shelf has all kinds of stuff in it because it needs to still be good 2 years from now. The rule is that you should apply to food is if it doesn't rot really fast, like within hours or days, it's probably toxic, because if the bacteria won't eat it, then you shouldn't eat it. And it's the same way with glyphosate, right? If it has glyphosate in it, then yeah, they genetically modify it so it'll live, but you shouldn't eat it. So another problem with genetically modified food is it's no longer the food that your digestive system was designed to digest, right? So for 5,000 years, we've been growing food. And now we have all this genetically modified stuff that's not exactly what we ate for 5,000 years. So our bodies have a harder time digesting it. So what's the solution here? Well, some people are saying, well, I'm just going to leave America and go live somewhere else where the food is not toxic. And yeah, that's a possibility. But what if you can't leave? What if you can't afford to leave? What if you got family here? What if you're tied to America? What do you do? So, and I had this, debate with myself. Should I leave the U.S. so that my wife and I can live healthy? Well, what about our kids? What about our family? What about all of our friends? Are we going to just ditch everybody and go somewhere else? So, we chose against that, at least for now, because we think there's probably a way forward. So if you study a European civilization like Portugal, Spain, Italy, you'll find that the food is usually locally grown, right outside the city, small farms. They don't use pesticides and glyphosate. They use as natural a process as they can. They figure out how to get rid of the bugs and the weeds without poisons. And then all that food is taken into town right after it's picked and sold. It doesn't need a shelf life because it's usually sold within 48 hours of being picked. Same thing with meat. The meat isn't injected with, all kinds of bad stuff. The animals, by the way, are healthier because they're not eating glyphosate either. And they're not inflamed. When you eat an inflamed animal, you get some of the results of that inflammation in your own body. If you eat a sick animal, it makes you sick. So animals are healthier when they're not eating glyphosate and all of the crap they're not supposed to eat, GMO grains and whatnot. So chickens that are raised, on free-range pasture, eating, bugs and plants. Cows and steers that are raised in grass, in healthy environments and drink clean water. These are the things we should be eating. So in Europe, that's the model, right? Food doesn't need a shelf life because it doesn't sit on a shelf. It's sold as soon as it's produced. And very few things actually need to sit either in an uncanned or unrefrigerated state. Yeah, they have refrigerators and they freeze things and they can things. But the problem in America is we expect food not to rot even just sitting on an room temperature shelf for years. Well, you shouldn't eat anything that can sit on a room temperature shelf for years. If it doesn't rot and if it's not canned and if it doesn't need refrigeration, it's not food. Don't eat it. So studying that model now, we're applying that to the U.S. So how can we buy food that was made recently, made healthily, without glyphosate? And the answer is there are small family farms. You just have to find them. Buy your vegetables, on the weekend, on a Friday or Saturday, and eat them that week. Same thing with fruits. If you can't find fruits in your area or vegetables, then find an importer who is either bringing them in from outside the U.S., where they were picked last week, not 2 months ago, and find foods that are imported. So, for example, here in the Dallas area, HEB runs Central Market, and we find a lot of imported foods there that were grown. For example, citrus that was grown south of us, even in the winter, and you can get good tree-ripened citrus that's imported from outside, not grown here. Same thing for vegetables. If vegetables that aren't in season here, you can buy them imported from somewhere else. Yes, that raises your cost of food, but what's your life worth, right? So when you eat healthier, by the way, you are satiated easier. You don't need to eat as much. Instead of buying junk food, you buy healthy, fresh food. The cost might even go down as you eat less of better food instead of more of toxic food. So these are the lessons we're starting to learn. So now we're buying locally grown beef, locally grown chicken, locally produced eggs. Our next door neighbors make eggs for us. We buy about 5 miles away from a farmer's market in-season vegetables. When we need fruit, we go down to HEB Central Market. Not any HEB store. Central Market is the one that does all the importing. So we go there for imported foods that are known to come from non-toxic environments. Just buying something with an organic label, organic is better than non-organic, yes, but you have to be careful because organic is not necessarily produced without glyphosate. This is the trick. So make sure that when you buy organic that you do the research and it's really produced without glyphosate. And it's not, just because it's organic doesn't mean they don't dye it as well. So make sure you're not getting food that's dyed after it's picked, and make sure it's not injected with anything. Make sure it has no coatings on it. There's some coatings out there that are toxic. And if you suspect it could be coated, then come home, wash it with baking soda and then vinegar. So separately, baking soda first, swish, 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 a little vinegar, and then you've got, it takes the coatings off. So lots of tips and tricks to learn here. But the journey is difficult because it's really hard now, because I can't just go to a grocery store and buy something because I look at the label and it's toxic. So we have to plan ahead now. We can't just do impulse grocery shopping. We have to actually intentionally plan, okay, we need this and we need that. Where do we get it? How do we source it so it's clean and fresh? Same thing with restaurants, right? Well, obviously you can't eat at fast food anymore because that's toxic. We all love Chick-fil-A, but you know, the revelations are now that Chick-fil-A, like most other fast food, is pretty toxic. And so you have to now start researching fast food and see what toxins do they put in the fast food. Strangely enough, when those chains exist outside the U.S. and other countries, they have a different recipe and it's cleaner. So it's not that they can't make the food better, they choose not to, which is another disturbing trend that we could spend another video on. So now you have to research restaurants you go to. We have now picked out in our area here in Little McKinney, Texas, about 4 restaurants. I'm going to give them a shout out because they are wonderful. So Urban Kitchen is a scratch, Urban Grill, I think it's called, downtown McKinney. It's a scratch kitchen. They make everything fresh. We can eat there. And the reason we know that it's healthy food is we don't feel bad afterwards. We don't get migraines. We don't have intestinal problems. Amy doesn't end up in the hospital from, being dehydrated. We had a horrible time a few years ago because every time she'd go to a restaurant, we'd end up in the hospital. So now we've got a trustworthy set of restaurants where we can eat over and over, and we trust them, and they know us, and we remind them, and we order meals that we know are cooked with everything that's safe. Other restaurants we go to, Rivieras in Princeton, great Mexican food, and a scratch kitchen. It's clean, we feel great afterwards, no hangovers, no side effects, no migraines. Let's see, trying to think of other places. The Italian restaurant downtown McKinney, we've been to a few times. Sometimes it's mixed results there. Sometimes we feel funny afterwards. Sometimes it depends on the meal. But we're going to go back to them and try to work with them and see if we can make sure that they prepare our food with clean ingredients, and so on. There's, I guess, more we could talk about, but it's quite a journey. I'm just giving you a flavor for what it's like to live a life where you really pay attention to what you eat, and you intentionally eat well, and you don't impulse shop at grocery stores and buy junk. If it comes in a bag or a box or a can, it's suspicious. Read the label. Make sure. And if it's got corn or wheat in it, and it's not labeled organic, and it's not labeled non-GMO, it probably is loaded with glyphosate. So, yes, it's horrible that we have to live this way. But if you don't want to get cancer and autoimmune diseases and hormonal problems, and if you want to try to lose weight, this is the only way forward. My wife eats 1,000 to 2,000 calories a day. In fact, her doctors have said she needs to up her intake of protein. She's malnourished because she's trying to eat so little, thinking that she's overweight because of her food intake. No, it has nothing to do with her food intake. She could eat nothing and she'd still be inflamed. The problem is inflammation. So all of these toxins, heavy metals, glyphosate, preservatives, etc., they screw around with all of your body processes, and they make your immune system weaker so that now you're susceptible to viruses. Epstein-Barr virus is a horrible virus. It causes shingles. It causes, there are several forms of it, and causes fever blisters, etc. So the Epstein-Barr virus is rampant, and you should go get tested. We didn't know that Amy, for example, has one of the highest Epstein-Barr tests. That's a bad thing, that her doctor had ever measured. And she got encephalitis, which is brain swelling, because of all the inflammation from a viral infection that is screwing up her thyroid and everything that they call an autoimmune disease. So all of this is kind of mislabeled. I don't anymore think that autoimmune means your body's attacking itself. I think what's really going on is your body's attacking Epstein-Barr virus and other infections, and it looks like it's attacking itself. And so these autoimmune diseases, Amy has 7 of them: lupus, Hashimoto's encephalitis, polyneuropathy, Raynaud's syndrome. I can't list them all. And so many of these issues are linked with glyphosate, which we think is now probably the root cause of not only my cancer years ago, but also her autoimmune conditions. So what do you do about glyphosate that's in your body? So there is an element called molybdenum. molybdenun, and it binds to glyphosate. Your body has absorbed glyphosate all your life, right? If you're listening to this, then you're probably younger than 80, and they started using glyphosate in the 70s and 80s, and it became really prevalent. High fructose corn syrup replaced sugar in most foods in the 80s. High fructose corn syrup is made with corn. It's made with GMO corn, which means it's loaded with glyphosate. So every time you drink high fructose corn syrup in anything like soda pop, then that means you're drinking glyphosate. Small amounts, but it builds up and it doesn't leave your body. So over time, glyphosate concentrations in your body are growing and growing and growing. And so you get inflamed, you get sick, your immune system starts having problems. You get Epstein-Barr virus infections, which is also shingles, by the way. So now we have young people getting shingles, which is crazy because that used to be something that only, old sick people got. But it's happening now to everybody. So now your hormonal systems, endocrine systems, immune systems are going haywire because of all these toxins. And now you're getting viral infections because your immune system's no longer working well. And by the way, if you got the COVID-19 genetic modification shots, then that adds to the problem. You're now even weaker than you used to be. So molybdenum is one of the many elements that you can take that will help bind to glyphosate. It's not magic. It took decades to get poisoned. It's going to take decades to get unpoisoned. Heavy metals and glyphosate do not leave the body quickly. They leave very slowly over a long period of time. So this is where you need to find doctors to guide you through this process. Just don't jump blindly into it and read the internet and decide what you need. Go find doctors who are experts in detoxing you, getting your hormones straightened out, and fixing the root cause. The doctors, most doctors have been trained to just prescribe you a drug. At one point, my wife was prescribed 27 drugs, and we couldn't tell the difference between the side effects of the drugs and the actual disease. So now she's getting off all of the drugs and trying to replace them with supplements and detoxifiers to try to get down to the root cause and not add to the problem by getting too many drugs in her system. So this is where we're going to pass on some learning. So here in Texas, Dr. Kendall Stewart down in Austin is great at understanding your genetic profile. Almost everybody has some genetic mutations. So that means you're susceptible to toxins disrupting particular body processes and hormones. So go get genetically tested to find out where your weaknesses are. So that's a good starting point. Another good starting point is to go to Dr. Brian Proctor. Get all of your hormone levels tested, thyroids, estrogen, testosterone, etc. Dr. Brian Proctor is one of probably the finest doctors I've ever met because he does root cause analysis. He doesn't just jump to what thing can I prescribe you from the pharmacy. He looks at what is the root issue here. How do we treat the root cause as well as manage the symptoms of the problem? And the goal is to get you off of drugs that treat symptoms and actually treat the root cause and cure it if possible. And it's going to take a long time. There's no quick fix. You were toxified, poisoned over a period of decades. So it's going to take probably years, 5, 10, 20 years to fix what took all your life to mess up. So Dr. Brian Proctor, can't say enough good about him. Go see him. He doesn't take insurance, so he'll be out of network for you. You can submit your bills to your insurance company afterwards. But it's worth every penny you spend. And so we are on a monthly plan with Dr. Brian Proctor. He he also has with him Dr. Peter McCullough, one of the finest heart specialists in the world, and also an expert on viral infections, particularly COVID-19 and the impact of the COVID-19 experimental gene modification therapy. And so he can help you through the process of trying to figure out how do I undo the damage I've done to my body, to your heart particularly. And he is a tremendous resource. He's in the same office in McKinney with Dr. Brian Proctor. There's also a doctor in Florida, Dr. Lisa Koch, I think it is, Koche. I may be misspelling that. Find her, she's in Tampa. She is brilliant. She had cancer at a young age, and that set her on her journey of understanding her body and how to treat it well. And she's been really enlightening to understand more about how our bodies work and how to avoid pharmaceuticals. It's not that we're anti-pharmaceutical, it's that you shouldn't immediately jump to, taking 10 different drugs instead of understanding the root causes and only taking pharmaceuticals as a management strategy, not a curing strategy, right? You don't want to be dependent on a pharmaceutical the rest of your life if you can avoid it. So figure out how to avoid it. Figure out what the root causes are. So Dr. Lisa in Tampa, Dr. Brian Proctor, Dr. Peter McCullough, and then Dr. Sheff. If you need a neurologist, and you probably do because there's almost always neurological involvement, brain, nerves, right? They're messed up too. Go see Dr. Maushmi Sheff in Frisco. Last name S-H-E-T-H. She is tremendous. She's the one who first figured out Amy had Hashimoto's encephalitis, which almost killed her. And she's brilliant. So go see her for neurological involvement, which is probably there. If you're feeling brain fog is a common problem with being poisoned and having a malfunctioning hormonal system, endocrine system, immune system. Brain fog is so common, and it also can lead to neuropathy, tingling, other problems. So if you have anything like that, go see her. Dr. Greg Yingling is a chiropractor who also does muscle testing and allergy treatment in St. Petersburg, near Madeira Beach. Go see Dr. Greg Yingling, Y-I-N-G-L-I-N-G, in St. Petersburg to get your body straightened out. You're probably having a lot of issues due to stress in your skeleton, in your nervous system, in your digestive system, in your organs, and you're probably allergic to things. So toxins in your environment increase your allergies, asthma, food allergies, what we call, gluten intolerance is probably an intolerance actually to the soy and the glyphosate. Right, so go get treated by either Dr. Greg Yingling or here in Texas, go see Dr. Bo Brantley in McKinney. He does a similar treatment. He treats you for allergies, treats your body. I went in to see Dr. Bo 2 years ago. I couldn't hardly move my neck. My back was locked up. I was in constant pain. My knees hurt. My ankles hurt. I was a mess. And that's just because I'd been had poor posture for years, mistreating my body for years. And in 2 years, I didn't need neck surgery. I didn't need back surgery. Just adjusting me correctly for 2 years straightened out all of my skeletal issues, my muscular issues, my joint issues. I don't have joint problems anymore. Most people would go to a doctor and have them do surgeries. I avoided all that. Because, believe it or not, the bones and joints are the only part of your body that will regenerate, not just heal, but actually regenerate. And so using that strategy and knowledge, you work with your bones and your muscular system and your joints, and you treat them well and get them adjusted constantly. I went in 2 times a week for 2 years. I still see him every week. And he's also going to treat your allergies. I'm not going to go into that whole process, but there's a treatment. Your brain actually knows what's wrong with you. And if you can figure out how to communicate with your brain, it'll identify what's going on and what you're allergic to and what caused it and how to clear your brain's allergy to things. Allergies are in your brain. Your nervous system controls your allergies. This was a shocking revelation to me. And so a month ago, I was allergic to dairy. Now I'm not. In a week, I got cleared of my dairy allergy. So now I can drink milk and eat ice cream and all those wonderful things that I couldn't before just a month ago. Crazy that that's possible. And so now I'm going back to him for other allergies so that I can get rid of all of that. And those allergies are probably caused by toxins in my environment, heavy metals and so on. If you're thinking about detoxifying from heavy metals, you should. Almost everybody should be doing it regularly, because heavy metals are another element all over our society. They're in everything. And they're in preservatives. So get rid of the heavy metals, but don't do it alone. Go see a doctor like Dr. Proctor, Dr. Lisa, Dr. Brian, Dr. Peter McCullough, or Greg Yingling, or Dr. Bo, or anyone else who's a functional medicine specialist. In other words, their first reaction isn't, what can I prescribe you that you can take for the rest of your life? Their first reaction is, what's the root cause? How do we address that? And let's set the goal of curing you instead of just treating you for the rest of your life. And that's a functional medicine doctor. And they're also often called frontline doctors. They're probably a member of the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons. So go find doctors like that if you don't want to find the ones nearby. My advice is go find the doctors I told you about, and then and learn from that process, and then try to find a doctor like that in your area of the country if you're not close by one of those. There are many more doctors we could talk about. We've been through about 40 doctors. Most of them were just people who wanted to just prescribe you drugs. A few of them are really good. And so if you want to reach out to me or to my wife Amy, I'm going to put the email addresses on the screen here so you can find us. We're happy to email with you and talk about your journey and our life experience and how it might help you. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not claiming to be giving you any medical advice. I'm just telling you the story that we've been through. It's been a long journey. And so I wish you the very best. And if you haven't given your life to the Lord, it's past time. It's time to do it. I have found there's no greater satisfaction and joy and security and safety than depending on your Creator who made you to walk you through what you need. And I used to have terrible anxiety disorder as well. That was also all related to my physical health. And what I learned is to trust in the Lord and take stock of my blessings and be thankful and grateful for what I have and what's going on right now. Whenever I worry about the future, I get all wound up, and I've learned, you know what, that's a fantasy. The future doesn't exist. That's all just worrying about nothing. And so I've learned to just live in the moment. When I'm worried about the future, stop, live in the moment. I'm okay. I have what I need right now. God is with me. He is my provider. He's my creator. He can provide anything I need. I just need to ask. So it's a spiritual journey. It's a physical journey. It's certainly a mental journey. You just can't live as a victim anymore. You take charge of your life and you say, I'm no longer going to be a slave to everything around me. I'm going to live intentionally, and I'm going to live with health and vigor and purpose. So I hope this helped you. I'll publish it and send it to everybody I know, just as a contribution to your life that I hope helps you. Take care.